All right, let's get right into it. Ever wonder where the smart money is actually going in this whole AI and cloud revolution? Well, today we're going to break down some expert analysis on three powerhouse stocks that could really define the next decade of tech. First things first, let's talk about the sheer scale of this, because the numbers are just staggering. To really get why everyone is watching this space so closely, just look at this figure. We are talking about a projected $3 trillion. That's trillion with a T, being poured into AI and cloud by 2030. This isn't just a trend. It's a massive tidal wave of capital, and it's the backdrop for everything we're about to discuss. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of these companies, a quick but really important heads up. This is all for informational purposes, okay? It is not financial advice. Every investment has risk, and all the analysis we're covering is based on expert opinions from a specific point in time. So, the most important thing to remember, always do your own homework before making any moves. So with that in mind, here's what's on deck. We've touched on that massive opportunity. Next up, we'll introduce the three big companies in the spotlight. Then, we're going to do a deep dive into each one, NVIDIA, Broadcom, and Amazon, before we wrap it all up with the final takeaway. So yeah, let's start with this idea of a technological gold rush. That $3 trillion figure we just talked about, it isn't just a number on a slide. It's the fuel that's powering the strategies of the biggest tech companies in the world. It really explains why they're making the moves they're making right now. So let's meet the three key players. The analysis we're digging into really highlights NVIDIA, Broadcom, and Amazon. And what's interesting is they're all seen as distinct but equally vital players in this whole AI ecosystem. Each one represents a totally different piece of the puzzle. First up, the undisputed king of AI chips, NVIDIA. Seriously, if you think of AI models as the new brains of technology, then NVIDIA is literally building the neurons that let them think. And this number right here, it just says it all. NVIDIA controls a jaw-dropping 71% of the market for those specialized data center AI chips. The ones that are absolutely essential for training and running those huge language models everyone's talking about. That's not just leadership. That is flat-out market dominance. So let's break down what this actually means. The argument for it is pretty clear. You've got market dominance, incredible projected revenue growth, and a long-term runway into cool stuff like robotics. But on the flip side, the risks are real. The stock's valuation is high, competition is definitely heating up, and let's be honest, the global chip supply chain can be a little fragile. But the expert consensus from the sources we looked at is pretty strong. Analysts basically see NVIDIA as an absolutely essential company for building out the world's AI infrastructure, not just for today, but for the rest of the decade. So if NVIDIA is making the brains, how do all those brains talk to each other? Well, that brings us to our next company, Broadcom, what you might call the quiet powerhouse. If NVIDIA builds the brains, Broadcom builds all the high-speed plumbing that connects everything together. And their AI business is already blowing up. We're talking over $10 billion in orders directly related to AI, and that includes from huge players like OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT. So this isn't some future hope. This is real business, on the books, right now. Looking at the analysis, the potential upside here is just huge. They're a leader in their own right in AI semiconductors, and they're looking at massive mid-30s revenue growth. So what are the risks to watch? Well, it's mainly geopolitical trade stuff. And the fact that the semiconductor industry has historically had these big boom and bust cycles. Now, what's really interesting here is the expert take on its valuation. Unlike the super hyped NVIDIA, some analysts see Broadcom as a potentially undervalued way to play the AI boom. Some are even recommending it specifically as a stock to watch for growth. And that brings us to our third and final company, the cloud giant, Amazon. Amazon's role here is a little different. Through its massive Amazon Web Services division, AWS, it provides the digital foundation. I'm talking about the actual server space where so much of this AI development and deployment happens. And the scale is just immense. AWS is currently running at a $117 billion annual revenue rate. To put that in perspective, that single division is bigger than the GDP of a lot of countries. It's this massive, profitable business that's the bedrock for countless companies building out their AI. So, the whole investment case for Amazon is built on that steady, powerful growth from AWS, which is still clocking an impressive 17% year over year growth. Plus, the e commerce business adds a layer of stability, and its overall valuation is seen as a bit more reasonable than some of the pure play AI stocks. The big risks? They're mostly external. You've got ongoing regulatory pressure and the famously thin margins in its retail business. But the conviction from one of the key sources, Motley Fool, is just crystal clear. Their analysis goes as far as to label Amazon as its single top long-term buy. That's a pretty powerful endorsement of its foundational role in the whole tech economy. I love this chart because it gives us a fantastic at-a-glance summary. You can see the explosive growth projected for the chip makers, NVIDIA and Broadcom, right? And then you compare that to the more stable, but still really impressive, growth of the cloud infrastructure player, Amazon's AWS. Three companies, three very different growth stories. Okay, so let's bring this all home. Let's talk about the final takeaway, some key dates, and what the bigger picture looks like. For anyone watching this space really closely, these were the dates that mattered around the time this analysis was put together. Amazon had already come out with strong earnings. So the next big reports from Broadcom and NVIDIA were seen as the next major health checks for the whole sector. The analysis also makes a really important point for investors who might be a little more cautious. If trying to pick individual winners and losers feels too risky, there's always an alternative. You can get broader exposure through something like an S&P 500 index fund. Think of it as buying a tiny piece of the 500 largest US companies, which includes all three of these giants and a whole lot more. So, the crucial takeaway here is this. We've looked at three very different companies, and each one represents a unique way to invest in this huge trend. You've got NVIDIA as the brains of AI. You have Broadcom as the essential plumbing that makes it all work, and you have Amazon providing the foundation that it's all built on. Three totally different approaches to tapping into one of the biggest technological shifts of our lifetime. And that leaves us with a final and pretty fascinating question to think about. As these giants and their competitors all battle it out for supremacy in this new era, who's going to win? Will it be the company with the best brains, the most essential plumbing, or the strongest foundation that ultimately owns the future of AI?